Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with this crazy modern market that is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make ideally some money on the internet and ideally not lose it all. Loaded up for discussion today, we have Bitcoin hitting a 94K all-time high before a slight pullback. Chill Guy surges to a $200 million market cap, driven by Tik Tok Investors. And staying on that theme, Gen Z trader launches and rugs a token called Quant for $20,000, after which it becomes worth more than 3 million. I think it's more than that now. I think it's more than a $50 million market cap. We'll get into all of that and more, as always, as well as the get you up to speed with the crypto price action and NFTs and a discussion on the general state of the market at the moment. So stay tuned for that. Today, delighted to say we've got Bread Guy back in the co-host seat. We've also got Funky back in the co-host seat. Whenever Funky is here, it is a Bitcoin all-time high day. Resident Bitcoin expert. Cannot wait to get into it. But just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here is financial advice. Unfortunately, we don't know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Bread, it is Wednesday. It is the 20th of November. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm alive. We've modified the setup a little bit. We're going to see if this carries me through the day. So I'm going to pre-apologize to basically everyone in the crowd in case shit goes sideways. That may happen, but we're going to try our best. Yeah, things are good though.
Like the pre-apology. That's good. Pre-apology. That is helpful. We don't know. Not only is this not financial advice because we don't know anything, sometimes we don't know what's going on with the tech either. But that's the beauty of the live show. The other beauty of the live show is seeing Funky arrive before the show, not knowing what accessories he's coming with. Today, Funky, do you want to talk us through the wardrobe choices?
Sure. So I got to give a shout out to the VanEck intern. VanEck intern followed me way back when the ETFs launched, and I basically bought some HODL just to say I own some HODL and interact with the account. And all of a sudden, he DM'd me one day and said, "Hey, we want to give you some free merch." So okay. I scooped this trucker cap with the orange HODL, and then of course I have a new Bitcoin Genesis T-shirt. I have an older one that has the entire hash. This has just the message that Satoshi put into that Genesis hash, that first block. So yeah, just really excited to rock it. And of course, had to wear the gold chain, right? I mean, everybody loves the funk.
So if you're just listening in, obviously we have a lot of people listening in on Twitter Spaces. We do this live on video as well. And one of the benefits of the video is to see Funky's accessories. Funk, one question on this before we get into the main price action and the headlines as usual. Last time you were wearing the chain, this time you're wearing the chain and the hat. Is there like an additional accessory every time we reach a new Bitcoin price milestone?
That's going to be hard to do because I got to imagine with so many milestones coming, I would just be weighted down completely and you wouldn't even see me anymore.
I think we should try. That would be a good motivation for seeing the price go up. So I'm here for that. Look, we've got a lot to discuss today. Big headlines, both on the Bitcoin side and on the meme coin side. So we do a little bit of a barbell show today, as well as an important discussion with Bread about ETH, the thing that's getting left in the middle, and a bigger discussion on the how money is being perceived at the moment. Look, let's get into it. Starting with the price action. I'm going to share this on my screen for those of you who are watching in. We've got Bitcoin just up a couple of percent. As I said, did touch 94K yesterday, just pulled back to 93.6K. ETH, unsurprisingly, rock solid, down 1%, 3.1K. Absolutely love to see it. Solana down almost 4% to $237. On the meme coin side of things, yesterday was a bit of a red day. Today, also quite red, a bit of a mixed picture. Doge is at 38 cents, up 1%. Pepe's flat. Shiba Inu is flat, down 3%. Sorry, Bonk is up 7%. Bonk guy just keeps winning, doesn't he? Seems to be that he was right at the moment. Whiff's down 4%. Popcat is down 10%. Peanuts down 4%. Goat is back down to around $1 or so. Mog's down 4%. Muse down 5%. So as you can see, a lot of red on that side of things. What you described as the meme coin majors and the meme coin mid caps. Obviously, the other ones have been absolutely rocketing, which we will talk about now and later, because the headlines is, of course, Bitcoin did hit an all-time high at 94K. Chill Guy surged to 200 million, driven by Tik Tok Investors and Gen Z trader launches and Rugs Quant token for 20K, after which it becomes worth 3 million plus. Notable sales: Autoglyph sold for 90 ETH, Tyler Hobbs Fidenza sold for 28 ETH, and a Milady Alien sold for 27.3 ETH. We've been speaking about the Milady price surge in the last few days, probably linked to the Cult token, which is coming out soon. The floor price was up above 6 ETH. So that is what is happening there. Just a little look at the NFT side of things. On ETH, at least, well, Milady's pulled back around 10% today, so it's just under 6 ETH. Bored Ape's pretty strong at 13 ETH or so. Pudgy Penguin's continuing this run up. It's up another 5% today, with the floor being at 12.3 ETH. Pudgy, little Pudgies are up 10% to 1.14. Doodle's down 8% or so, but the Penguins seem to be the main movers today, continuing that trend. Let's get you up to speed with the rest of the news before we have a bigger discussion today. Asset manager Van Eck endorses a US strategic Bitcoin reserve. There was a very interesting spaces held yesterday by Van Eck with Senator Loomis, who proposed the Bitcoin reserve, the Bitcoin Act, which is the act to try to enact a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And Michael Saylor was also present. So that was an interesting one to listen to. Funky was there. We'll do a little breakdown on that a little later. We've got a blockchain team leader at law firm being considered by Trump team as chair of the SEC. Van Eck commented on that, saying that seemed to be a good thing. The Frog account teases a Wintermute partnership. Frog is steady at $500 million FDV. The Penguin ecosystem, as I said, continued to surge. And Phantom, this is an interesting one because of the discussion we had the other day. The Phantom wallet breaks into the top 3 utility apps in the App Store. We said on the show, a lot of people are looking out for Coinbase being the top app, and maybe that would be a top signifier. And we said, no, the smarter way to look at it is that when Phantom becomes the top app. And we're getting close. We're getting close, at least in the utility category, not the top app across the board yet. So that's the roundup of what's going on in the space, the headlines, the price action, and the other news. Brad, before we get into the main chunks of the headlines, is there any other bits of news there catching your attention? Anything else you've been thinking about? What are your thoughts?
I actually wasn't thinking about it until Funky just mentioned it in the chat, talking about Bonkai. Bonkai doing great. You highlighted it there. I remember that I got a pretty good airdrop because I have a bunch of like Claynosaurs and shit from the NFT, and I sold all that. I sold all my Bonk, and I thought it was a W back in the deep bear. Like I think I made like 10K ish on it, which I don't even want to know what it's at or would be at now. So I'm just not going to look at it, act like it didn't happen. What
is your strategy for those things? Because there's already a lot of that I've seen on the timeline where people are talking about what they would have made. Are you just like, whatever has been done has been done, I will not check the number? Is that how you deal with it?
No, I was mostly just saying, I'll go back and look at it now just to like kind of laugh at it. Numbers are fake right now, frankly, in this space, right? Like I talked about my pups bag, right? Like I bought it literally for nothing. Like in the initial craze of ordinals, I think I threw like $1,000 at pups just randomly from a TG thing, forgot about it for a year, worth 6 figures for a while, worth 5 figures a little bit after that, and now back in the 6-figure like realm. So like, dude, it's already funny money for me, and like, it's I don't need money. Like, whatever, I'm doing fine. So it's funny to kind of talk about shit. I like to think about the numbers, and it like drives my partner in crime insane to think of like what no longer like actually triggers a reaction in my head because that she thinks about what she would do with the same amount of money. Like, yeah, it's not real. Doesn't count.
A lot of interesting points there, as you say. I definitely think we've lost touch of reality, if we're being completely honest. I was speaking to Legendary about this over the weekend because I had a family birthday event, and I was talking to some family members who are like either slightly younger than me, and I was just hearing the numbers that they were talking about as they were like fairly aspirational young people trying to do more stuff, like trying to further themselves and what they were willing to do for a bit of extra work or a bit of extra stuff. And honestly, I came back from that and just sold some stuff. I came back and sold some stuff because I was like, this is so much money relative to what like normal people who are like professionals consider to be like a useful amount of money. So I came back and just sold some stuff because like this is getting a bit absurd and in some ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I'm sure Funky has some of these stories too. Like I think back to like when you were a kid. Like I come from humble beginnings. My parents aren't anything. They're just
Yeah.
like blue collar people. I was like, dude, 60K a year, life is set, fucking set, right? And like now, like evaporating 6 figures, and just kind of laughing at it because like this space warps your perception of reality.
Just be like, oh, there'll be another one next week. There'll be another one next week, maybe. No, it is funny, but then yeah, trying to think through it responsibly is like, it's kind of what we were talking about the other day. These windows of opportunity happen for a while, and then when they close, they'll be gone for a long time. So that's definitely a helpful kind of reflection to have out loud. Funky, any reflections there as well from your side?
Just what I would say to Brett and anybody else who's listening, of course, not financial advice, is always leave a moon bag, right? Like Zeneca just had a great post about this in the last few hours where he said, like, literally he was a screenshot where something I had never even heard of, Huff or Huzz or something, it's worth like 25 grand. He said that was worth less than $100 like 24 hours ago. So you just don't even know, right? And this, I think, kind of underscores Brett's main point of just how absolutely silly this space can be. Like there is no real reason in the real world why anything like this, much of these meme coins especially, deserve these kinds of valuations, right? Like they're just insane when you think about there's no working product, there's nothing like that's actually adding value to anything. So you know, in Bonk, my case was I didn't get in way early, but I did get tipped off about, like, I kind of knew that there was going to be a listing for Coinbase and Binance, so I just bought some. And when it ripped, I got about like a 10x. I just sold half, and I literally just sat on the rest. I actually staked it, so I got more bonk back. But then all these other catalysts have happened, right? We're talking about the burn and all these other things, and I always in my gut thought, okay, if each chain has sort of the apex meme that is, you know, whatever the original one was, right? To me, it was always bonk. It was always going to be bonk on Solana, despite Murad saying like, oh, it's a soulless project and so on and so forth. You know, to your point, bonk guy just keeps winning. So I'm just hanging on to it, and I'll probably peel profits from it and literally roll it into BTC.
Love it. Very interesting stuff. We're gonna talk more memes a little bit later, especially the rise of the TikTok memes and what on earth boomers or zoomers are gonna, or how people are gonna react to all this stuff. So we'll have that discussion in a little bit. Before we get there, and before we talk about the big Bitcoin space yesterday and Bitcoin almost being at all-time high, Brad, as soon as we're about to get to your segment, it looks like you have dropped off because you have oh, he's back. As soon as we're about to do the segment, we're gonna try
I'm
and
back.
do it, Brad.
Dude,
You're
I quick hopped it. Am I alive?
You're alive. It's time for your segment. As soon as I was introducing you, you decided to break out.
That's hilarious. All right, I'll fire right into it then. How about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So yeah, Bread Tech breakdowns. We're gonna try and actually like get into some of this shit, talk about some technical topics, and make it digestible for people. So this one, if I can get fucking through it, is ETH is money, or ETH as money, right? Because whether it is or is not is kind of the thing that people are trying to talk about. So setting the context, there's a lot of consternation right now in the ecosystem about like how you value ETH as an asset, especially in the modular roadmap with L2s, a bunch of other stuff. And a lot of people recently are leaning on this thing called like moneyness of these assets. And money itself isn't really defined, but typically breaks down to 3 properties. It's store of value, medium of exchange, or unit of account. And people are trying to isolate and quantify the moneyness of Ethereum within the Ethereum ecosystem. So that's mainnet ETH and all of its L2s. So there's 2 basic positions of this. One is the first is ETH needs to burn or have deflation. Now, with that comes like usage of mainnet, or the L2 is paying back to mainnet to actually like use like with their user activity, and that this would be broadly categorized as like the ultrasound money camp. You may have heard this narrative, is where ETH is used so much, at least on mainnet or now through L2s, that the actual issuance of Ethereum was deflationary, therefore ultra sound money. It kind of comes from a meme from sound money, which was Bitcoin. Now, this camp believes L2 should be charged more because right now they offload a lot of user activity and they don't burn a lot of ETH, and they should reduce the amount of inflation that actually is happening from Ethereum mainnet. Now, Ethereum mainnet actually has a really low issuance rate. It's like 0.4% roughly relative, or over last year, relative to most other chains. I think Solana is around like 4%. Then you have Bitcoin, which is actually in that same neighborhood. So relative to all their chains, it's actually issuance is pretty low. But people are saying even lower, even further to a minimal viable issuance number. And there's some EIPs in place for that. And then the other side is actually, and this is for like Bankless, also Grow the Pie. They're actually building a dashboard for this. Their thing is that at the valuation that Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin, that Ethereum has, right? Like if you look at raw burning of the asset, like it's nothing relative to the actual market cap, right? So like if you look at the highest single day from the last, I think it was, I just did the math on it, highest single day from the last year, and extrapolate that over full 365 days, right? You still are only burning like 0.008% of the supply relative to the market cap, right? So like it's basically nothing. So like if you're going to value it based on just like cash flows is how you would say, it's like it's overvalued, wildly overvalued. Same thing with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin does not have a whole lot of activity on mainnet, right? And because it doesn't have a lot of activity on mainnet, you can't look at it and say Bitcoin is worth X because it's burning Y, right? You just say Bitcoin is valuable because it is something that you want to hold, right? And therefore it's a little bit of memetics. You have a lot of people that buy it, that hold it, number go up because of that. So the other camp, again, the bankless fossils, whatever, they're trying to sit here and look at like how can we quantify the actual like usefulness of Ethereum within this ecosystem, this constellation of L2s. And that's the big debate. So it's like, okay, do we focus on the burn? Do we focus on just the usefulness of the asset, and which one is more value accretive to the actual asset itself? For myself, I am in the camp that you need to try to create a narrative around the moneyness stuff. I don't think it is yet. And I think that's why they're doing the dashboard stuff. It's still kind of messy, especially because money is so abstract. Like people know it, right? You have $1 in your hand, but like what makes them money is not something that's widely used. When you have something like Solana, it's just like increased bandwidth, lower latency. Like that's their roadmap. That's what you do. With Ethereum, oh, we want to be a better money. Like what are the technical deliverables for being a better money? Like no one fucking knows. Like there's no clear A, B, C, D to execute being better money. It's all kind of fluffy. And because of that, frankly, you just like there's not a lot of value accrual to an ETH asset right now. So that's the headwinds of the asset.
I love it. That's such an interesting breakdown. A little bit philosophical on like what exactly do we mean when we're talking about money here? What exactly is ETH striving towards? What direction is it going in? One of the things I guess is kind of pushback that I was mentioning to you before we started on the show, and maybe the direction of thinking that I'm going, which would be helpful for people to hear, is in my real life, and I've been saying this on the show for a while, the way I think about money in the real world, again, saying like this is all fake money and magic money, but the way I think about money in the real world is that the dollars, the pounds that I have, it's just gas fees. So I'm actually thinking about it backwards. Like my pounds in my bank account are just gas fees. I just need enough to get a coffee, to go to a restaurant, to get petrol, to do those little daily activities, but it's just gas. And so if ETH is money, and this is an unfortunate conclusion for me because I still hold a sizable amount of ETH, if ETH is money, then why do I need it? If it's just gas fees, don't I want to own the commodities? Don't I want to own a bit more Bitcoin? Don't I want to make a more leveraged bet on tech by betting on Solana, which is, we've spoken about this before. The metrics are outstanding. And yes, I already own Bitcoin. Yes, I already own Sol. But I just, on the specific concept of what money is, and if ETH is money specifically, which I know it does other things as well. But if that's the narrative that we go for, and if that's the thing that it's most useful for, I don't know if I want to own it, because I want to own the commodities and I only need enough to get by, because that's how I view what money is. What's your thought on that, Brad?
What are you doing? Do you have any money in your bank account?
Yes.
Do you acquire more money, or strictly to have more money? Or are you always exchanging, like, are you having a minimal amount of money in your bank account at all times, always swapping out for stocks or coins?
Minimal viable money. No, I do have, I have money in the bank account, but
do you endeavor to acquire more money?
I endeavor to acquire more Bitcoin. I endeavor to acquire more assets which are worth more. So like, I don't know, after I got my airdrop from, where was it? What was the most recent one? Eigenlayer ended up being quite sizable for me because of the creator ones. I think there was 15 to 20 grand in that. I bought 2 Jack Butcher physicals from his most recent drop. As part of that, and then half of it I kept as money. Half of it I kept as money for tax, which is gas fees, and half of it I kept for to have some money as part of the thing. And then I acquired assets, which I think are already up in value and will be. That's how I'm thinking about it.
So I bring that up because yes, so you're trying to acquire dollars, money, and then you try to acquire the thing on the other side of the money, right? And you use money as the medium of exchange, right? So whether it's stocks, whether it's even Bitcoin, whether it's whatever, you acquire the thing, and then you want the secondary thing, which in some of my tweets I've talked about, the hot state, right? So in this world, it's the hot state that we want access to, because that's the thing that you think goes up higher. So you acquire, you're using real life real life examples, you acquire dollars to acquire stocks, right? You need dollars to acquire stocks. Problem that I think Ethereum is facing right now is because you don't always need Ethereum to acquire the natively issued thing, whether it's the meme coin, whether it's the whatever. Because right now, right, you want to acquire Quant, right? This little 14-year-old dude dunking on everyone with 20K. You want to acquire that, and to acquire that, you need to hold SOL, right? So SOL is the money in this analogy, and because of that, people are acquiring a shit ton of SOL to acquire a shit ton of the asset of issuance, or not the asset, it's asset of issuance, but the hot state on the chain, right? And this is meme coins, this is whatever. And because of that, SOL independently is going up. And we talked about pre-show, I personally don't want to acquire the stock. I don't want to acquire the meme coin. I don't want to acquire whatever, but I want to have a little bit of a broader index on you guys doing the degenerate shit. So I acquire SOL, right? It's it becomes this mimetic thing where it snowballs up, and larger size people, because the people meme coining probably aren't buying enough SOL to move the price, but there are enough people that see the crazy meme coining doing the hot state access that acquire SOL, that drives SOL up relative to everything else. So I think, that's why when I push for the ETH needs to be money thing, it's mostly just that you need to find a way to create really hot state that everyone needs to acquire ETH to access. The problem is in the Ethereum roadmap, it's not happening on mainnet, and only a handful of L2s are either capable of handling that information or that throughput, or are willing to denominate in ETH broadly. Some of them use their own token. So it gets kind of fuzzy when you start doing this stuff. Cosmos, I know Funky does the parachain stuff, Polkadot, they also face the same issue whenever you get really modular with all this shit, because it's not always strict adherence to using the native asset of the parent chain that drives value to it. Atom has notoriously suffered for that. I don't know, parachain, maybe you could speak on that, Funky, but I think it's just in the modular roadmap, value accrual to the hub asset is not a solved problem. It's very, very tough.
Yes, this is such a helpful conversation. I think it's literally helping me in real time think about it. So the thing that we kind of came to the conclusion there, I think, and I would want to hear Funky's thoughts as well, maybe as it relates to Polkadot or as it relates to Bitcoin, how you think about it. But in 2021 for ETH, it was, I guess the majority of meme coins were still there, and there was the NFT craze, the NFT craze where everyone had to have ETH to get that next asset. And I think therefore, for each chain, rather than focusing on the base token, the thing that has to be done is you have to create assets or hot states, as you refer to them, that people want to participate in, that people want to acquire, that people want to hold. So in a way, it's not really even about the token, right? It's about the thing that you need to buy with the token.
What you enable. It's what you enable with the chain. Totally is notoriously flippant about SOL economics broadly. He's I don't give a shit about the inflation. I don't give a shit about what it's used for, whether it's money, whether it's whatever. He's I just want to create a badass chain that people want to do cool shit on. So he does that. This decentralized NASDAQ is what he tries to lean on. And because he's enabling a lot of shots on goal within his state environment that absolutely requires Solana, because he's enabling that, it's creating these opportunities for people to want to do something, create some cool shit, and needing to have SOL to do the thing. So it's kind of creating, but with Ethereum, right, that strict adherence to needing ETH to do the thing isn't always there. And talking about fractured liquidity, fractured user base, all that shit's a thing too. But he leans into it's not really important what I do with the main asset. I'm creating an ecosystem that enables cool stuff that you need the asset for.
Like it. Very, very helpful framework to think about stuff. Funky, want to bring you in here. Obviously, you're resident Bitcoin expert. So how does this relate to Bitcoin for you, this conversation on, there needing to be an end state. I mean, maybe you think Bitcoin is outside of this conversation, right? But you are also involved in the Polkadot ecosystem. So how might it relate there?
I mean, I'm going to take a bit of a contrarian take, right? In the sense that I think moneyness as an idea is probably misplaced and unnecessary, right? Like, I think it's wrapped up in this idea of cryptocurrency, because the way Bitcoin started, it was a peer-to-peer digital cash. It is not that, right? Like, no one is going to refer to it as that now. No one's going to use it as a method of payment at this point. I really always liked, if Bitcoin was a digital gold, which again, that narrative is kind of fading. I've always loved the Ethereum narrative of digital oil, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're talking about these things, even getting beyond money, this is all energy, right? Like, I mean, energy is what makes things happen. It's what propels things. It's the catalyst, so on and so forth. And, legendary notwithstanding, who loves to take, pictures of his dinner and say how much it costs to mint something in a particular amount of ETH or SOL, right? And there is that idea that we want to wrap up around money, but I feel like it's better to look at, like, I'm not concerned about the long-term vision of ETH, right? Like, no matter how it scales, whether it's through L2s or what have you, as long as it continues to remain sort of the de facto base like economic settlement layer for crypto, which it is right now, right? But again, could this be like the 1990s and this is Netscape and we're going to see something that completely takes over in the future? Could it be Solana? There's so many different variables at this point. Like, I think to get lost in the whole moneyness debate doesn't really matter all that much, right? Because it's to your broader points that we've been making. Is the asset useful? Do you want to continue to accumulate that asset? BlackRock and all these other big TradFi bros are going to do everything on ETH, right? Because you can't count on, where Solana is right now. You can't count on its liveness, right? To use an Ethereum term, right? You're going to get a huge amount of economic security out of ETH, right? Whatever the whole thing is worth, 300 billion plus, versus a much smaller number in Solana. Not that it would be very difficult, right? To like 51% attack Solana. But there's other issues that happen, right? Where the throughput becomes problematic, the thing kind of shuts down. So, we're just still so early. And I wish sometimes people wouldn't get too wrapped up in these narratives, right? When along a greater timeline, I think ETH is going to bear out its usefulness, its value, and everything else. It's just at this, as Brett points out, like, it's just at this weird point in the road in its journey, in its evolution, where it's trying to kind of establish its footing. But I have no concerns about the long-term health of ETH as an economic settlement layer.
Interesting. Okay, very, very interesting segment here. Glad we had that conversation, because people just want to pit these main assets against each other all the time right now. So it's a pretty violent
That's hard, right? It's hard to sit there and watch your neighbor like just rip face. So it's like, and again, I've talked about this before. Like, I think it's particularly frustrating because it's not like Ethereum has done nothing, the ecosystem broadly, right? So I think the consternation comes from everyone's looking at like, fuck, we're putting so much energy into all of this stuff. Why isn't Ethereum appreciating, right? And like, there's a lot of noise there. Like, obviously there's a lot more tokens, a lot of like all this shit, but it's like, it's a lot of frustration, I think.
I think that is fair. Just to do the final the final analysis of pitting all these things together, I think it would be interesting for people to see this. Obviously, people should know, if they don't know, Cobie, legendary crypto trader, investor, crypto participant, has actually been way more vocal on the timeline recently, just sharing his thoughts on numbers and assets and various things. He replied to a question yesterday about how much Bitcoin versus ETH he held, and also his rotations. I don't know if people see this because the account is private now. I'll just share it for you guys to know. Loopify tweeted asking him, the people want to know, do you own more Bitcoin than ETH? He actually replied 17 hours ago saying Bitcoin 10 to 1. And then he was asked, when did you flip from being mainly in ETH? Because that was, I think, his previous position. He shared this: I was mostly ETH until 2021 cycle, and after FTX was majority Bitcoin, and then all Bitcoin and Sol for a while. After Bitcoin ETF slowly moved to majority ETH. After ETH ETF approval, back to Bitcoin and Sol. Re-added a small percentage of ETH over the last month. Not perfect timing by any means, but did okay. If I'm looking at that just based on the last few years, I think that's pretty outstanding timing. from what I remember. If you remember correctly, when the Bitcoin ETF went through, Bitcoin actually chopped for a bit. It did move up as well, but it was actually ETH that ripped at that point in time because it was thinking about the ETH ETF. So the Bitcoin Sol barbell has clearly been a thing. Cobie's been in that. Interesting to like adding a small percentage back of ETH over the last month, but ultimately it sounds like still majority Bitcoin and Sol. I don't really know what to do with that. That's more information just for people to have, because I don't know if everyone sees that. And the timeline at the moment seems to just be everyone shilling tickers. So part of this show is just to like find the right information and just share it with you and like do what you will with that information. I'm not suggesting like anyone should be copy trading anyone else, but it's just helpful to have that information. Brett.
Yeah, as I say, this actually makes me reminds me of when Hayes was talking about rotating from Sol to ETH and ETH, whatever. And I think for me, it is just a reminder that like there's upside in the main assets. You don't have to chase the crazy all-nighter, 14-year-old TikTok degen stuff to like do well in this space. And I think, it's been a while since we did this, and we kind of talked about it earlier in the show. Like, 6 months, a year ago, I was always reiterating to myself, like, I don't need a lot. I don't like, and I will have FOMO. Try not to realize the FOMO of like actually chasing after the stuff that I'm not good at. Right? I don't want to do the TikTok stuff. I'm not great at the TikTok stuff. Therefore, and I can be totally fine and successful and make enough money to live my life and be happy and whatever in the majors. So like that's all Cobie's doing. All he's probably like doing some degen stuff on the side. That's what Hayes does. Like you don't have to do the crazy low cap shit.
You say that just underneath, they asked what percentage cat coins, and he said 70% cats, 20% other animals, 10% CIA coins. So you can have your other allocations, right? Look, as you say, just a final point on this, because I think it's helpful from like private conversations, is I would say, I know that some people are crushing it, and I know that people on the timeline, it appears that everyone is winning, and it feels like everyone's winning more than you. I've had multiple private conversations, and the general perspective I have noticed is that people are down, actually. Like, I don't know if that's consistent with the other conversations that other people are having, but I know that a lot of people are chasing because they're seeing so much stuff happening. And my experience from conversations is that people are down. So be careful with it, manage your risk, just manage it in the right way. Brad, final point on this before we get into the headlines.
Nothing crazy. It's just like, try to avoid tilt, right? Tilt's a real thing.
Tilt.
You see it all over the place.
Yeah, got to say, I did a bit of tilting. The time that I tilt, I think I need to just check myself. If I wake up too early, and I saw it was funny, Captain, who I think's in the audience as well, had a tweet earlier today where he was like, got up at 2:30 in the morning, like wide-eyed and alert. And this is what happens to me as well when I've got open positions in things that are not the majors. Like if I'm in the majors, I sleep perfectly, everything's fine. But if I have open positions that are not the majors, I'm like alert at 3 a.m. and I'll like check things. And if I in those first few hours, I need to ban myself from making any transactions because there's no point. There's absolutely no point. But that's the tilt I think you're talking about.
I started telling my other half, I'm giving her the numbers, and I'm like, I promise you, when these numbers are hit, I have to do X, Y, and Z. So like now I face the wrath if I don't do the things to hold myself accountable.
Nice. That is a good strategy. Okay, we've got 20 minutes left of the show. We've got some important headlines to get into. I want to start with the king coin, Bitcoin. Bitcoin hit 94K yesterday. Slight pullback today to 93K or so. A few bits of information coming out, which I thought was particularly interesting. Yes, we're in a hugely bullish environment generally since the election result. So that's obviously one of the reasons why we are moving so aggressively higher. But there are two things I picked out to just bring up today, which I suspect might have been missed because of all the damn tickers on the timeline all the time. First one is this. This is coming from Forbes, where they had the headline yesterday: odds of creating a US Bitcoin reserve rise after state introduces bill. I know lots of people are aware that Senator Loomis is going for this kind of federal level Bitcoin reserve. But what people might be less aware about is this idea that the states themselves are moving towards this idea too. So what they shared is they said this: on the world's largest prediction platform, Polymarket, the odds of Trump creating a Bitcoin strategic reserve during the first 100 days in office have jumped from 22% to 38%. That's happened very recently. But the reason why it's increased, they say here, is that the increase came shortly after the introduction of the Pennsylvania Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Act last week. Furthermore, the Satoshi Action Fund advocacy group, which is behind the new Strategic Reserve initiative and also helped the state with the Bitcoin rights bill introduced last month, has shared with Fox Business that it's also speaking with 10 other states about similar legislation. If passed into law, both bills would have significant ramifications for Bitcoin markets. Namely, Pennsylvania's Strategic Reserve Bill aims to allow the state to invest up to 10% of certain funds, including the General Fund, the Rainy Day Fund, and the State Investment Fund, into Bitcoin. So I think we touched on this last week as well. But this is just, it seems to be moving forward. I think there's been additional news coming from the Satoshi Act Fund, which is run by, I think it's Dennis Porter. And so I've been following his content quite closely now, and it sounds like there's just more and more states in conversations to try to do this. So I think this is one huge tailwind going into more positive price actions. People are speculating on either, well, at a federal level, the reserve being established, or at a state level as well, and the kind of ramifications that those two things would have. The second thing that I thought was very interesting was there was a Spaces held yesterday by Vanek, Senator Loomis, and Michael Saylor. It was a very interesting conversation. I stayed for almost all of it. And I would say the two main takeaways, well, it was a very bullish space. Saylor is obviously crazy bullish. If you listen to him for any amount of time, you just want to buy as much Bitcoin as you possibly can. Two things that was said by Senator Loomis that I found interesting. One was that, she made the general point that personnel is policy, and we are definitely turning towards people who are more pro-Bitcoin, or you need those pro-Bitcoin people in order to get things to happen. So that seems to be confirmed, that there are more pro-Bitcoin people being involved. The second thing, which is maybe less known, which she said, is that there are things we can do. I'm just going to share this on the screen at the same time. It's not a written thing. This is just me quoting the space. There are things we can do without legislation to get the government holding and buying more Bitcoin, e.g. converting existing gold reserves to Bitcoin. One thing I don't know if that's been communicated properly is her kind of core proposal is less about finding more money to buy Bitcoin. It's more about take what we already have. It's not going to cost us anything as a country. We don't need to find the money from anywhere. We already have this amount of gold. Let's start converting that converting that gold into Bitcoin. And her position, at least on the space, although, needs to be verified legally and all that stuff, is that we can actually do that without legislation, according to her, on the space. So that was something new to me. And then the final thing, which I thought was interesting, is that Saylor revealed that he would be presenting, how we said on the show a while ago, we reported that Microsoft would be having this vote on whether or not they should be considering Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. We also noted that they, this was put to a vote by people, but the board had already said, like, yeah, we already look at this. Like, it sounded like the board themselves were quite negative, but Michael Saylor himself will actually be presenting to Microsoft, because he was contacted by the people who proposed, and so he'll actually have that meeting with them. So that is super interesting as well. And I just think all of these things happening at the same time. Yes, the structural political stuff happening is really important, but this stuff, just like another couple of bits of information that are coming through live on the timeline that I think is increasing the bullishness towards Bitcoin. That's my bit. Funky, I want to come to you straight away on this. You listened to the spaces as well. Did I get everything? Was there anything else you found interesting there? What are your general thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually have a lot to share, both in terms of I did listen to the entire space, but then also on the heels, right before that space, I actually went to my member Blockchain Association members monthly meeting. So I got a lot of alpha to drop from there too. But starting with the space and with Senator Loomis, I think Sam, shout out NFT Stats, like he gave a great job talking about this the other day, because I think the more that, having listened to Senator Loomis speak and what I learned at the Blockchain Association meeting, I think Sam is right insofar as it's far more likely that the first step that they would do, this is probably what Loomis is getting at in terms of not needing legislation, is simply transferring the 220-ish thousand Bitcoin that they've owned across a decade plus from seizures and so on and so forth into the strategic reserve, or what will eventually become the strategic reserve. She went on to say that if they do initiate this strategic reserve, it would probably likely be in the second half of the year. And there's something to be said about what was discussed at Blockchain Association meeting for why that's also true. And she said, more than likely, if that were the case, they would do this transfer, and that would count as the first year's worth of Bitcoin purchases. Only at that point after would they really start selling gold certificates so that they could generate the cash flow to actually buy Bitcoin. So now we're looking at a timeline where the US government might not actively be purchasing Bitcoin until mid-2026. Now, on the heels of that comment, I think it's also worth noting that Saylor said he believes this is the last time the halving will have any kind of impact on Bitcoin price. Because if we do get this true nation state FOMO, and we know if you look at a logarithmic chart, the volatility is going to smoothen out over time. It's still, as Brad would love to say, up and to the right, right? Like nothing's going to stop that any point soon. But the volatility, the seeing God candles of 10% and whatever, I think those days are going to be left behind us, especially if we do initiate this nation state FOMO where countries are starting to accumulate Bitcoin because of the game theory playing out. Now, getting back to what I learned at the Blockchain Association meeting, another reason why I think that would be a good bet to bet no on Polymarket is a couple different things. In addition to what Senator Loomis said on the space, at our meeting yesterday, we had an awesome overview of like who's coming into what, who's going to be sitting on what committee, and so on and so forth. And I flat out asked the members, the Blockchain Association team, have you heard anything about this rumor that Dennis Porter put out there that Trump was going to put in an executive order to actually initiate this so that the states could not front run them? And they flat out said, no, we've heard nothing like this. And they are incredibly plugged into what's going on in Washington, D.C. So in terms of like a Twitter rumor versus hearing from the Blockchain Association themselves saying we've heard nothing like that, I think that that's really important to keep in the back of your mind. More importantly, legislation is just slow. It's an arduous process. It doesn't matter where we're talking about, the state level, the federal level, whatever. But that also goes, it kind of dovetails into what they were saying at the meeting, because they said, look, at the end of the day, Trump has really three things he has to deal with immediately. The Senate especially has to deal with immediately. One is confirmations of all the appointments that he is making during the transition that are going to then take office after the fact. They have to be confirmed by the Senate. That's going to eat up a bunch of time as the new year rolls in. They have to fix the debt ceiling / overall spending before they get into like a whole debt ceiling fight. That has to be done. Then they also have to probably pass whatever kind of tax package that's going to be issue number one for Trump and his team in the first 100 days. So all of that's going to suck up the bandwidth. On top of this, there is no companion bill in the House whatsoever. So like Senator Loomis threw this out there into the ether. Yes, it's great. It's been a great talking point. It's bullish for the industry. We know where this is all going. But again, you need to have a companion bill in the House. There's nothing in sight. So like when you add up all these different factors that I just happened to hear yesterday, I still, of course, think it's going to happen, right? But I think the timeline, we're all infected in crypto land with just this like, oh, it's got to happen tomorrow. Like everything has to be hyper and instant and so on and so forth. And I don't think that that's going to be the case. We're still talking about the US government. I remember Obama had that famous thing about, you don't pivot on a battleship, right? Like it's not like riding a speedboat. So like there's something to be said about how long this is going to take, but I think long term it's all going to happen.
Love it. A lot of helpful information there. Always trust Funky to ask the questions flat out to their faces like that a lot. That's how we get to the proper information. Because as you say, can't just endlessly go off the rumors on Twitter. So at some point, someone's got to ask someone a hard question to their face. So appreciate that additional perspective, Funk. Brad, any final reflections there? We have got a question here in the comments from Just Stefano. I know we don't do too much male astrology here, but he asked, you guys think all these things that are happening make the bull run go for longer than we expect? I've had a lot of traders. Actually, I feel like the window keeps shortening. People talk about, I spoke about there being two halves, the way that I was thinking about it. Like we've got the inauguration, you've got pre-inauguration, and you've got post-inauguration. Then I heard people talk about, until the end of the year. Now I've heard people say you've got 8 weeks. Now I heard someone say you've got 6 weeks. Some of the behavior on the timeline is suddenly pushing towards like some type of mania phase. Brad, do you have any reflection on that?
Nothing other than just like take note of like catalyst events, right? Like price up and down, like is dependent on things happening narratively that like unlocks capital or locks capital. And like what Funky's talking about there, right? So like, okay, whether or not like we have a cluster of narrative events that are unlock a shit ton of capital, like in 6 years, a year, whatever, it's just good to take mental note. So like if this happens in isolation, everything else is bearish. It's like, 20,000 things happen that are bad or lock up capital. And then we have like the thing that he just referred to, like say they start doing the strategic reserve. And I just looked it up. There's like $600 billion in gold on the balance sheets for the US. Like if they start converting all that stuff, is that enough to outweigh all of the bad things that maybe are potentially happening in that same time frame? Like evaluate that whenever it comes up. Right now, we just had a big catalyst event, which was, Trump winning the election and unlocks all this like bullish stuff for the future. And like now everyone's starting to deploy capital. So, for me, there are no answers. It's always just going to be drink it in as it's coming. And he just isolated some things that are catalyst events in the future, the long future. Hopefully it plays out, but like you just have to stay dynamic in this environment.
Yeah, maybe a final point before we go into the meme stuff is that I think this is probably, I was listening to the All In podcast earlier today, and Chamath was talking about his Bitcoin position, and they asked him like, well, they didn't ask him directly, but one of the things he was just contemplating or reflecting on was to what extent Bitcoin is now uncorrelated to the rest of the market. Like, is it ever going to be that risk off asset? And in his position, and I think I agree with this for now, is you might want it to be, but that's not how it behaves at the moment. And so the other story that's being told at the moment is in the broader market. It's not entirely, I know inflation's kind of wrestled with it a little bit and tamed it just a touch, but there are indications that it's just not actually under control yet. So if that starts to rear its head next year, I think it's like we're in a honeymoon period for the next 2 months either way. So I don't think anything bad will happen now. And I think this mania continues for a bit. But to Justafano's question, I think if there's cracks in the broader market next year, that could be something that would prevent the honeymoon from being extended into like a broader happy period. But I think the Trump presidency, they'll want markets to boom in general. That would be the absolute, that would like be their North Star. And it will just be a question of can inflation, to the extent that Bitcoin is still going to correlate with all this stuff, if inflation goes out of control, then that is bad, because every other time that's happened and we've had to increase rates, that's been bad. And if there was anything that stopped this rate cutting cycle that we're in, I think if the rate cutting cycle continues, we're really off to the races, given all the additional structural things that have changed as well. So always got to keep the rates in mind, I think, and inflation, because that's how it's behaved before. So that's my final take on that. We got to spend 5 minutes on the crazy meme coin activity stuff. Brad, do you want to just share a couple of bits on what's happened here, and then we'll just reflect on what we're supposed to do with all these TikTok investors taking over the timeline and outperforming all of us?
Yeah, I mean, which one? Because like there's several that we even have in the call sheet of like what we're going to talk about. So I mean, the one you assigned to me, the chill guy. You want to hear about that?
Do that one.
All right. Yeah. So like this one is, and again, coming from someone distinctly outside of the trenches. So this is my observation of people talking about it. Is I know recently the big wave was all the AI stuff. It's changing the future of France. Like everything's great. Now we have seen a little trend swap to TikTok memes. Again, I'm not a user of the TikToks. I'm a certified boomer. So what my interpretation of this through tweets is that this little guy right here is the chill guy meme. And it is kind of taken over like this mental health boom over on TikTok of like, dude, just like he's just chill. He's the fucking dude from I forget what the actually like the Philadelphia talk show. It was the meme like of the actual dude that now is a cartoon dog. Anyways, so it's that person is taking off on TikTok, and because it's taking off on TikTok, it has ballooned on Pump Fund, and now everyone's predicting like it's a rotation from AI meme, just TikTok memes, frankly. And this one did to.
You are cutting out just a little bit, Brad, so I will take over from there. I think we got the main information across. Just in addition to that one, there's also the Quant coin, which I'm going to share the screen for here. The quick summary of what happened there is this Gen Z trader who's got caught on camera. This is going to be a meme in itself, I think. Launched a token called Quant. You got to see his face, and you got to actually watch the video as well, where he launched a coin, went completely crazy, rugged it for 30K, got exceptionally excited on the stream, and sold it all, dumped on everyone's head. The crypto community rallied around the coin, sent it to 35 million. I think it's actually now at 45 million. Yes, it is. It's at 45 million now. So it's gone much higher. Crypto Twitter retaliated by doxing his name, address, and school, which is, I think, actually against Twitter. Well, maybe it's not against Pump Fund rules, but that's against Twitter rules to dox. Maybe it's okay to. No, you're not allowed to dox locations, are you? So that's actually like against Twitter rules. But that's what they did anyway, unfortunately. And I guess the bigger question here, Funky, is look, TikTok is probably going to play a role now in the meme coin stuff. Yes, we've had the more original, like Solana-based meme coins first. Had this like AI thing come up. We've had decentralized science coins happen very, very recently for a couple of days. Now we're moving over to like the TikTok memes. What's your reflection here? Do you think they can create the markets themselves?
I mean, it's obviously the case, right? Like with a kid doing something like this. I think what's really interesting is that when you think about as a Gen Xer, right? So I'll be the first to admit, as someone who's nearly 50 years old, I do not belong to this Gen Z, right? But having taught high school for a long time and being aware of how quickly youth kind of takes up trends and alters them and shapes culture, I think that this is really important because TikTok is such a dominant social media platform. So many Gen Zs or Zoomers are on there. And to Murad's point, right, like they're not going to make life-changing gains by buying Bitcoin or ETH or Sol or anything. They're going to come here with 50 or 100 bucks in their pocket and try and multiply that money as fast as they can. And they're just so, digitally native and addicted to the dopamine hits. I mean, look at pump.fund. I mean, whoever designed that website, like I went on there the very first time and I was like, oh my gosh, shut it off. Like, it's so frenetic and crazy, but they thrive off that stuff. So I think that there is something to be said that many of them are going to be onboarded into the broader crypto space through TikTok videos, through these kinds of mimetic propagation, these ideas, and people just seeing like they want to have fun, right? Whether win or lose, to see a kid chucking birds and stuff like that. That's like a hilarious thing, right? Like even as somebody, I laughed hysterically when I saw that this morning. I'm like, only in crypto, right?
Yeah. One, I take a lot of those points. I think that makes sense. Brad, maybe a final take here as we come to close out the show. It's funny how, how the conversation has always been like, everyone in crypto thinks they're so smart. They're going to pick the coins that they're going to dump on retail's heads when they come. Do you think this is an example? And I can't remember how this happened in 2021. Maybe I was more on the NFT side and maybe I wasn't thinking about this as much. Do you think this is an example where the real reality is they just don't even care about the coins? They don't care about the coins that we have or the narratives that exist on crypto Twitter. They don't exist on crypto Twitter. Retail's not going to come for your coins. They're going to do whatever the hell they want from TikTok, and you're going to go buy their coins, and maybe you can run them up, or maybe you're going to get dumped on. That's the game that we're actually playing here. What's your thought on that?
Oh, that's tough. So yes and no. I think still the natural reaction is to get the coins and then like seek safety, right? Like seek the safety in the higher market caps. Like yes, they don't want to come buy your coins, but like they're going to come, they're going to get like indoctrinated, all this stuff. And they go, oh, I want to go to the safer meme coins once I've like done all the weird shit. And then they're going to go for the Pepes, the whatevers. And like, so that like first blush, will they buy our coins? Is like, I just want to ape into Doge because Doge is going to $1. Like, probably not. I'm skeptical, but like, I think that is closer to them than like going and buying Solana or going and buying some L2 token or going and buying whatever. Like that is still relatable to them. And like the large cap meme coins are still the thing that is safer to them than like the crazy trenches that they get burned by. And then I think that's ultimately what it resolves to. I don't think they'll like try to just like live in the super low caps.
I love it. And if you think about it, that's exactly the experience of the NFT cycle in a way, where people who had been in crypto beforehand would have just thought, just come and buy my bags, like I've loaded up. And actually all that happened was people like me in 2021 came in and I was like, right, I'm going to go straight to Nifty Gateway. I'm going to use dollars and I'm buying this X copy piece because I think that is a cool thing. Suddenly that's worth a lot of money. Right. Now, how do I get some more of these NFTs? Oh, I need some ETH. Right. I'm going to go buy ETH. It's like, oh, this ETH thing just keeps going up in value. Maybe I should try to accumulate more of it. And then, you know, a year later, it's like, oh, Bitcoin. How do I get access to this now? It seems like ETH is valuable, but Bitcoin's way more expensive. Maybe I should learn about that more. I think ultimately you're right. That's the way, the way that you join the dots over time. So definitely one to watch. It's just funny now that the place from which you're starting, it just gets further and further removed from Bitcoin, because you're starting on like some TikTok meme, then it's like a CT meme, then it's like a low cap, mid cap, high cap meme. Then you get to Solana even after all of that or something. So interesting stuff. Any final reflections, boys, before we close out? It's a fun show.
I was hoping Bitcoin was going to hit a new all-time high. I actually have the ticker open, but it's very close, off by a couple $100. Are
we back above 94?
No, I was keeping an eye on it because I was waiting for just get a little bit over that 94.02. Need a new all-time high today.
It's right, Funky. We'll have you back on the show when we do hit it. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to Funky and Brett, as always, for co-hosting with me. And thanks so much for joining us. We do this every day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour. Check out our YouTube channel. There's more content going up there every day as well. We're also available on Apple, Spotify, if you prefer your content there. Have a wonderful day. Take care, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.